Welcome to the panel of the role of technology in trusted connectivity. And we have had already topics that relate very strongly with the role of technology or depend on the technology all the time in digital world. And we had a very nice keynote on these issues as well. But now our aim at this panel is, together with our honored panelists, to look at trends and challenges from the perspective of both industry, national governments, and organizations like European Commission on three focus areas. So the discussion topics will first touch on connectivity and regulations, then on global competition, and on cloud services as well. But in order to get started, I would ask each of the panelists a little bit broader question, which allows the panelist to introduce herself and their organization and bring in some key issues. So I would start with Liam. So maybe we could hear a little bit more about what government transformation means for Amazon Web Services. Is there something more than just transforming our national data into the cloud?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mart, and thank you very much for having me today. I work for Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud company. We run services on the cloud. They are and they form the backbone of many services across industry and across government. But as you say, it's not just about migration to the cloud, and the transformation team I lead is made up of essentially senior leaders from governments around the world who've delivered nation-scale reform. So people who've worked in government and have come over, and we help other governments with their transformation programs and help them move their programs into a modern, online, cloud-based way. We've got a fairly wide scope. We operate all the way around the world, so the team is based, I've got one person in New Zealand, I've got one person in Seattle, and I've got 30 people in between, where we can work worldwide to help people transform their government services and learn from people who've actually done it before. And that's a really important part of what we do. All of that running on a secure and very resilient network of 27 regions made up of multiple data centers and multiple network connectivity. The reason I'm talking about that is because one of the key things that governments are coming to us now is to talk about resilience and continuity of government. And the continuity of government, as we've seen with Ukraine, has been absolutely vital in helping maintain confidence and trust in government, which we saw during the pandemic was right at the heart of the reforms that came through then, and it still remains part of the reforms we have now. And so that's why we've been so pleased to work with the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation to help migrate and move and back up their digital infrastructure, so that they can continue to operate, and not just with the government in Ukraine, but also banks, educational sector, and the cultural sector, so that whatever gets thrown at them, they can continue to operate, and wherever Ukrainians are, they can continue to interact and work with their government. And we see that continuity of government as being one of the great changes and one of the great reforms that people are looking for at this moment, because you can trust the government with your data, you can trust the government to manage and run and operate services, but right at the heart of delivery is the availability of the service and the continuity of it. And that's one of the things we see as a great trend at the moment.
Thank you very much, Liam. Innocent, so you lead Information Society Authority in Rwanda. It's a great responsibility, and there must be a lot of challenges ahead of your authority all the time. So could you describe a few which are most relevant?
Thank you, and good morning once again. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Innocent Muhizi, like I was introduced, and I head Rwanda Information Society Authority. This is a government agency that is in charge of digitizing public services. And with that mandate, it's 360 degrees, if you will. We start from deploying infrastructure, and by infrastructure we do fiber optic cables across the country, 4G networks, and other wireless technologies. And we ensure that each and every public office, every public institution is connected onto the national grid, technological grid, if you will. And after that, we make sure that we now automate different public services. Our Right Honourable Prime Minister yesterday mentioned over 300 services that are now online. We still have many more, and we have a target to ensure 100% by 2024. But it starts from automating simple processes to actually really high-end, different and complex government services. But we go further and make sure that the citizens who are going to consume these services are digital literate. Because it's one thing to automate here, but if the people cannot be able to consume these services, then it becomes an issue. So that is one we also do. And we also focus on internal capacity building for our IT teams, our public servants, to make sure that at least they understand how to deliver these services in a digital and technological manner. But one of the key challenges now to bring to your question is that yes, you might have connectivity, but if you don't have digital literacy, it becomes an issue. Yes, you might have connectivity, you might even have the digital literacy, but if you don't have the requisite infrastructure, and here even to the basic devices that you're going to use to consume these services, then it becomes quite a challenge. So some of our initiatives are geared towards making sure that we have the right devices, we have the right infrastructure, and we have the right digital skills to be able to consume these services. But over and above that, we have to make sure that some of these services are now secure, because if they are into the cyberspace, then it becomes quite vulnerable. We have to ensure a protection of these services. So last year in October, Rwanda launched the data protection and privacy law. We are now working, making sure that every institution or every entity that processes personal data is compliant by October. So, which is October next year, that is, which is a big challenge. So, over and above all these things, we have really to make sure that cybersecurity, data protection, and integrity of these systems is really enabled.
Thank you very much. Rodrigo, so could you tell us a little bit about European Union's ambitions in space sector?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Also, thank you for having me here. It is quite interesting. I think if a space guy like myself would have appeared in a digital summit a couple of years ago, many people would have come through the door, see if there is an astronaut there, and then they would have left disappointed shortly after. And I think this is changing. And it is changing because more and more, I think we are realizing across different sectors, also in the digital sector, the importance of space, the importance of space data, the importance of space technologies, the importance of space services. And this is, I mean, this is true if you look, for example, at the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Space is contributing to many of those, also to very basic things like the resilience and security of our activities, the Green Deal, digitalization. On all these sectors, space is in, and space data, space services, sometimes they are enablers. Other times they are a resilience element that comes on top. So I think more and more, if you want, space is everywhere. And the European Union has recognized that. And this is why there is a big political push at European Union level that resulted in the creation of the EU space program, basically built based today on two key existing pillars and new that are developing. Navigation, satellite navigation, very present in our daily lives. I don't need to explain you that actually probably you came here using satellites when you used your in-car navigation or your mapping device in your mobile phone, and probably some of those were actually, by the way, European from Galileo. Earth observation. Earth observation is key for us to observe how our planet is changing, to handle in war situations, to handle in case of natural disasters, etc., etc. And this is well established. The Union has been well established in that area. And there is a new element coming, and I think it's one that we will probably talk through the next questions, which is the element of connectivity. How can space provide connectivity? I mean, we are moving away from the direct to home, the broadcasting services of the past. Space is more and more present in our connectivity. And there, of course, from a European Union point of view, there is a first important element, which is the element of secure connectivity for EU governments and governmental authorized users, and how it will trickle down from that. Then from the point of view, so this is a little bit the global picture. From the point of view of the agency I represent, by the way, I didn't mention that I am the executive director of the European Union Agency for the Space Program. On the agency I represent, we work in three key areas, and I think they all have a relation also with what we are discussing today. First, operations, exploitation, so making sure that all these space systems are kept running and keep providing services. Security, a lot of the things that, I mean, and space is becoming more and more important, and you were mentioning before the good guys and the bad guys, and the good guys are using space and are using Galileo and are using Copernicus. And since it is important, maybe many of the bad guys may want to disrupt that. So we need to protect, we need to make sure that those services are secured. And then the utilization, which is key. When we are talking about 15 billion euro over 7 years, it's a huge investment for the European Union in space. So we need to make sure that this comes across the very different sectors, be it in the digital world, but also other things. I mean, it's everywhere. I was last week talking to experts in metaverse about the use of space data and services, and also this is a reality there. So quite a lot. There are quite a lot of links between the digital world and the space world.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. So. We have had quite troubled times over the last years. So if we think about what lessons has COVID and the war in Ukraine offered to us in regard to connectivity and trust in our technological solutions, so can you say how European industry had to adapt to these changes and demand for trusted connectivity?
Yeah, so I think it taught us a few things. It taught us that without digital connectivity, we are quite vulnerable, both in society as a whole, but also security-wise. Second of all, that we have for many, many years as an industry thought that the world would just be more and more and more open. And all of a sudden you have tensions between nations that requires that there are sanctions posed on Russia, of course, that so certain supply chains are being disrupted, that we have lack of critical components, that we never really thought about digital infrastructure and digital in general as something really, really vital for a society. And I think that wake-up call that digital is basically the heart of the well-functioning society, both in war and in peacetime, has become very clear. Second of all, our supply chains have not necessarily been kind of considering bad and good guys. So again, a vulnerability from a business perspective, a vulnerability on certain components or raw materials coming from areas that might all of a sudden close down, and a need to basically look at how we can be more resilient in this manner, but also on how the markets are functions. You know, some of the the components that Ukraine is needing today, I'm not sure that they will buy in the future, I would say. So all of a sudden, the markets are being divided in the good and the bad guys. And for Europe, that has had a huge consequence in the sense that we have a lot of trade outside Europe, a lot of growth outside Europe. So Europe has also had to pay a price for that. But I do think it poses a huge opportunity for government and private sector to look at these vulnerabilities and to discuss how do we, going forward, actually make these mechanisms of forecasting. How do we make sure, for example, in space, that we work with connectivity, where we have some of the best players in the world with the space agency, and become even better in space connectivity. So there is a lot of new business opportunities and a lot of new partnerships shaping this world of geopolitical tension, but also an awareness on robustness. I mean, a little bit of joke in the sense that, I mean, the European Commission has been investing a lot of money in research and development on microchips, but I mean, I think it's around 8% that's being produced in EU. So is there also something about a geographical spread of supply that we need to think about to be a robust society? And not definitely, and then the danger is that, of course, that develops into protectionism, which is what we should avoid amongst like-minded nations. So a lot of learnings there, but I think the word is saying that digital is at the heart of a resilient society is just super obvious for everybody. And instead of closing, we need to gang up, and we need to see how we can make ourselves more robust. Because there is no nation, and I would say not even maybe continent, that can create this resilience by itself.
Thank you very much. So my next question, I would actually like to have answer for the same question from Rodrigo from EU perspective and Liam from industry perspective. And the question is that we probably all agree that there is a strong demand for trusted connectivity in society, but are we able to answer this demand with our current technological solutions and also current business models? Or do we need some significant changes, new approaches? And maybe, Rodrigo, you could go first. And of course, you already said that Governmental Governmental.com is a topic, but probably it's not something that forever would lie kind of European taxpayers would pay for that. Probably there are some questions about the business models of these additional networks. So how would you reply to that question?
Okay, let me start indeed with Govsatcom. Govsatcom is something that is already there today. It's part of what is the EU space regulation, and is based on a pooling and sharing mechanism among member states that have capabilities for secure communications. There are not many out of the EU27, and to make this available to the EU27. I think for here there is a clear demand, and from studies we have done, I mean, there are several areas of application, because there are needs, there are concrete needs. I mean, the EU27 between them, among themselves, but also inside themselves, they need to have ways of communicating secure. And I think this is something, by the way, that are also relating to the previous question, part of the lessons learned that we took from the COVID crisis, that we took from the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It is indeed this need to have secure communications. Very varied, from connecting key infrastructures, crisis management, surveillance, etc., etc. So really the level of application is very broad. And this is, if you want, on the demand side. Then looking to the future on top, or in addition to Govsatcom, our colleagues at the European Commission have pushed forward a legislative initiative to create a secure connectivity program, secure connectivity activity, which is right now in the normal, in the standard political exchange between the EU Council, the EU Parliament. We will have to wait a little bit until this process comes to an end, and then to see how that initiative is going to progress. I think what remains very clear is that, again, through the crisis and through the current situation, there is a very clear demonstration of the need. The need is secure communications. The need is secure communications for governmental users, for government authorized users in a very wide scenario. In addition to this, I think there is yet another element, which is the element of communication or secure communication, actually has a synergetic effect with the other things that we are doing in space. When we look at positioning, when we look at Earth observation that have nothing to do with connectivity, at least on the immediate look, they actually benefit quite a lot from each other. I'm going to take you an example that is completely out of this room, which is look to a modern tractor. I know it's a little bit far-fetched, but look to a modern tractor, which is a digital machine. And it is a digital machine because it has very precise positioning, and it has Earth observation maps and pictures to exactly map where the tractor should move about. Then you add the connectivity element to that, and you have a connected machine. This is extremely powerful. This is about our agriculture more efficient, farm-to-fork strategy, etc. So the reach is really very broad, and therefore the need for connectivity and for secure connectivity is very important. Space is not a replacement technology. I think this is very important to be said. Space, if you want, is an extra resilient element. It's an extra layer of resilience, and it allows certain type of communications that, let's say, are built on top of what are today our standard connectivity means.
Thank you. And now the same question to you, Liam. And if I would be you and need to answer based on public source, I would say, obviously, AWS needs to have this communication as well, because we invest into Kuiper satellite constellation. But what is your official opinion?
Yeah, so I think you raised a really good point earlier, which was how do we, keep customers are unsatisfied. And I think Jeff Bezos' great line was, our customers are wonderfully unsatisfied, and that's what drives the change that we drive through our businesses and with our customers every day. I think 2 points on that. One is, you're right, we are investing in space. So we've announced we are going to be providing a low Earth orbit service. We've an investment of over 3,000 satellites that's going to go live in the near future. In the short to medium term. And that's going to enable us to offer connectivity, which we feel is very needed actually around the world. But the core part of that, and the thing I wanted to bring to bear about thinking about the difference between this from a corporate or from a government sense, is speed and the ability to do this at speed. One of the crucial components that we have really spent a lot of time building, and in a way you think about it, we go slower to begin with to go faster later, is to be able to build in security and trust right into the architecture of everything that we build. And that means that we're able to leverage that as we build more and more components on top and more services on top of them. And so when we look at space and we look at the use of space to help us increase our customers' ability to do things, one of the things we've seen in Ukraine, we've seen this in other markets, is the use of that connection from space, from cloud to satellite, to edge, to mesh. That ability to link up those components has been absolutely fundamentally powerful, and it's one of the ways that we can see the growth of compute in the future in areas which are not served by core fiber infrastructure. And we can see that as a really challenging and really strong area. And so being able to leverage the cloud and leverage it in that way, where your security model is predefined, where your trust is baked into the services you provide, that enables people to move at very great speed later on. And that's where we really see the growth in that area is leveraging space and also edge and mesh services to enable us to grow our customers, to grow their reach and grow their service delivery faster and more effectively.
So, because my background is in space technology, I'm very interested in getting one question. You already mentioned this chain through service and through connectivity to people is very important, but for AWS, this having your own satellite constellation, communication constellation, is it more to control this connectivity, that you don't trust others to control it from technology point of view?
I must stop you there.
it,
No, not at all, because it's the way that we work and the way that we operate is within a competitive market where we're open about things. And the way that we're working at the moment, the stuff that our disaster response team is using in Ukraine at the moment is all linked up with Starlink. The disaster response that we're doing with in the Caribbean at the moment is all linked up with the services that are available. And that's very much the way that we work, and it's very much the way that our customers work, is we use the best technology that's available at the time. And that's really, really important, because if you do end up with a sort of walled garden approach to technology, we've all seen where that's got to. We've all seen where that's got to in social media. And it's one of those things that by being open, and going back to Cecilia's very robust comments about openness, by being open and by having an open and competitive market, the corporate world, the business world moves faster. And areas where corporates try to regulate and pull back and only use their own tools are as slow as in areas where governments start to regulate for the sake of for their own ends, and that's a really, really powerful brake on progress. And so we see the ability to grow fast and the ability to grow and the ability to grow capabilities as fast as we can as one of the great challenges that we have. But you do that by building in security, by building in the core values, the core European values that we all subscribe to and AWS subscribes to, into what your offer is at the very beginning. Because if that's the case, then you're in a position where you can actually start to leverage that to help other people create the magic which they build with their applications and the services that they deliver.
Thank you very much for this clarification. Innocent. In Rwanda, your strategic view on the future of connectivity, do you see it more like evolutionary trajectory or more like revolutionary trajectory? So do you expect just quality of services improving over time, or do you see that some other, for example, from mobile networks to more to satellite-based internet will be the future? So have you analyzed these future trends?
Yeah, thank you. For us, really, it's a combination of both, evolution and revolutionary. Because, for instance, from the revolutionary point of view, last year we launched our space agency. We did not have a space agency. Right now we have Rwanda Space Agency as one of the critical organizations that are going to help us, leapfrog some of the steps that otherwise would have, taken quite a long time to go into. And the way we look at space technology is there are quite a number of different use cases that we can be able to use. For instance, if you're looking at infrastructure development, agriculture, it's very easy to use the space data to be able to inform on certain things. In Rwanda is a mountainous country. It's actually nicknamed the land of 1,000 hills. So whenever there is rain, and we have rain all year round, so there is quite a lot of soil erosion. So we're trying to use satellite and space imagery really to be able to understand what is the trend, and if we project into the future, what do we see, and how do we start to develop solutions to really address some of these challenges. So there's quite a number of different use cases where we see space coming in handy. But again, on the evolutionary part of it, we will continue to develop the technologies. We now have 4G coverage across the whole country, more than 95%, and we've started to look at 5G and other emerging technologies. So for our case, trusted connectivity, and maybe connectivity first before you even get a trusted one, touches on a number of things. First, we have to have, an environment that is conducive enough to allow all this type of connectivity to be in place. This is a regulatory, political, and the policies are in place and are conducive enough. Number two, now you go into deploying the connectivity that you're looking for, and that's where the government works with private companies to give them space and allow them to really deploy different types of technologies. And thereafter, now you have really to make sure that you have services that are running on this infrastructure. And then you go into making sure that actually the data that is generated and all these systems are hosted in sufficient cloud services, which I was talking to Liam and say, how do we get AWS in Rwanda? And maybe let me touch on something really that I think yesterday was even mentioned. It's one thing to say that we have this technology, therefore let's share it, go and use it. And I think there's an analogy that was used yesterday of, instead of building, when you want to build a city, build a house. But we would actually say, let's give everyone the building blocks, the bricks, the metals, and everything, and allow them to build their own houses the way they want. Because truth be told, you're not going to get one size fit all. There are different market dynamics, there are different political environments, there are different business environments that are going to dictate how things should be done. So from that point of view, I think it's going to allow each and every government or even a company or what have you to be able to build something that is fit for their purpose, that allows them to develop as fast as they can, but also steadily and sustainably going forward.
Thank you very much. Cecilia, so we have some legal frameworks and regulations that regulate now new technologies also. So how do you see, is our current legislative framework good for European industry to contribute to these connectivity solutions, or is it more like a showstopper?
Well, I actually, one of the things that I was just thinking, listening to these gentlemen, that I mean, to be fast and to work together with other players across borders, across companies, across institutions for that matter, you need a common language. And the common language are typically standards. So standards in cybersecurity, standards in artificial intelligence, common data standards, not least, which is maybe one of the biggest problems in digital communication. And what we have seen, so on connectivity, of course, Europe has been leading with their standards for a long time. But there is a range of area where standards are still emerging, that being cyber, artificial intelligence, data in general, etc. And how do we make sure that we have those standards defined together with the both companies and of course with the nations that we work with. And one of the places where we discussed this is the TTC with the US, in the digital dialogues with Japan, with other nations. And I think this will be extremely important also for European industry to actually have a common industry-based defined standards on all these areas, also on connectivity. Well, then for connectivity in general, if we look backwards, just to answer your question on Europe, I mean, we have had a framework that not necessarily has been fostering, I would say, investment. In the sense that I think in Europe we have 110, 120 telecom operators, and I think in US they have 4, and in China they have 4. And there's a reason, because you could say connectivity and the baseline connectivity has become a commodity. And if you're not allowed to merge, so in Europe we have prevented many of them from merging and from becoming bigger. And when you prevent that, of course, then you don't liberate the capital to invest. And therefore, right now, we're in a situation where even though we have some of the best connectivity players in the world, we are really behind in 5G investments. We look towards Korea, we look towards China, we look towards many other nations that we would compare ourselves with. It's a little bit funny how we put ourselves in this situation. So I think we need to look at in general, that In digital, things will have to scale in every sense. So there are some obstacles right now in how we designed Europe in actually creating the necessary investment for building strong 5G. And in a minute, I mean, we'll not be discussing 5G, we'll be discussing 6G. And maybe we skip the 5G era and jump straight to 6G, or even better space connectivity with their satellites involved. So yes and no. We need to be much more agile in our way of thinking on digital, and we need to think about the involvement on industry in creating those standards. This is actually one of the reasons that we have these great connectivity players. It's actually because we allowed the industry to work together across border to define these standards. So much more also industry-driven standard-based, industry-driven standards, and much more cross-border speed-scale thinking in Europe would definitely benefit.
Thank you very much. Maybe a little bit the same question to industry as well. So how AWS sees currently, how restrictive are the current legislative frameworks in different countries? So in your business development?
So I think we find, the point I was going to make about standards actually just at the beginning was open standards was a core. I used to, I'm afraid, be a civil servant, and one of the core things that we made sure right at the very beginning of all of the reforms for digital services in the United Kingdom was around standards and open standards, and defining open standards properly, and then making the very clear statement that the regulator and the governments could choose the standards that were developed, but the actual development of the standards was done by industry, and that's really, really important, because governments run at a different speed to industry, and therefore, going back to our thing about speed and scale, it's really important to have the standards developed in that way. And there is a framework I recommend you to look at for how to develop open standards and make sure that they are in place. In terms of wider regulation, we work, obviously, my team and our company works around the world, and we work with governments, and we obey the rules and the laws of the governments in the countries where we work. And that's consistently, that could be, you could look at that as a challenge, but it's actually one of the great opportunities that we found in how to work with governments to help them and to help make sure that our services and the trust that people place in the services that run on those is rock solid, and that's one of the core components of our approach to every country in which we work.
Thank you very much. So from here, it's just good to jump to competition and global competition, because it's all not only about new technologies, but also about who develops them and owns the profits eventually. So Rodrigo, maybe you would like to comment on how does it look like? Who is leading in global competition for technologies for trusted connectivity? Is it more like democracies, or do autocracies have also a role to play there?
Thank you. I will comment on that. Let me just come briefly to the previous question, because I found the discussion of us and the points on standardization extremely important, and I share the opinions that were mentioned, that standards are extremely important. And I would like to link also with what you mentioned before, which is it is fundamental to give not only the data and services, but also to help how to use them. It's very true, I think, when it comes to space. I mean, for example, with Copernicus, we generate 20 terabytes of data, which is great. But if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know what to do about that, and by the way, through standardization, you simplify very much that process. This is quite fundamental, and there is indeed no one size fits all. It doesn't exist for the EU27. And honestly, we are quite small when you look at the world dimension, and certainly what is applicable or what is useful for Estonia or for Ireland or for Portugal or for it may not be one-to-one translated to Rwanda or to many other countries around the world. And standardization really plays a role in making that bridge and in helping in that. It's something I wanted to mention in relation to the previous question. When it comes to secure connectivity, how will be the competition? Well, let's see. It's I mean, there are established players in the market. There will be a number of constellations appearing, coming up. Let's see how it will develop. The only thing I can see, the only thing I can say, and I come back to my initial statement, is that in terms of need and in terms of user requirements, in particular for governmental users, those are quite clear, and it is also quite clear that whenever you have a governmental usage, the governments will need to have a certain level of assurance. And what that will be, it's for the future, but governments need to have a certain level of assurance on the availability and the reliability and how the data is treated, etc., etc. And that will play a fundamental role. And by the way, that is at the, if you want, that is at the birth, both at the EU GovSatcom initiative and now at the Secured Connectivity Initiative, is, let's say, this governmental utilization. Then, yes, I think we can see and we can imagine a world where different countries, different areas, different blocks eventually will use different capabilities. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So what do you think, Rodrigo, if China puts up its own low Earth orbit satellite internet constellation and provides service for free for all citizens of the world for just purely political reasons? Will we be in trouble in Europe?
There will have to be a political reflection and then a political response as well, the political action in that sense. Connectivity has become a commodity. As we had water and electricity for many years, now connectivity is becoming a commodity. It's becoming so essential in the way we live that we can't really. I mean, it's something we cannot think our life without that. Which means there is an element of public service on that. Not everything is public service, obviously, but there is an element of public service on that. And obviously, the European Union needs and has the ambition to provide the level of public service to all EU citizens, also to all regions. I mean, connectivity is a key factor of cohesion. And we want to have, and this is clearly a political goal, to have a EU that is based on cohesion, that independently where you are, if you are in the north, in the south, in the east, in the west, in the islands, that you are part of the same union, that as a EU citizen you have access to the same things. So that element of cohesion is important, and connectivity is a part of that. Connectivity is a part of that. So in such a situation, certainly there would be an action at political level.
Thank you very much. So if we talk about global competitions, and we tend to speak about, well, Europe, America, China, these levels, and all the like-minded nations, and so on. But we are very fortunate to have African representative here. So from the perspective of Rwanda, how you see this global technological competition here? Is it from your nation's point of view just the best quality price wins, or are there some political aspects to the preferred technological solutions? What would you say?
I mean, technology is technology, and if it is able to offer a particular service, then I think there are going to be different choices left, right, and center. But I think what is very important is to see it is going to emerge, it is going to grow, it is going to be an open competition world out here. But what I think is critical is that there are rules and policies across the globe. And I think we talked about standardization, and I think standardization and strategies are going to play a critical role in either balancing out what sort of technology that you're going to go for. So I think based on the rules that are in place, based on the standards that we all adhere to, and based on different strategies of different countries and nations, I think that is what is going to determine what technology or who wins the game. But I don't think it's this versus the other, but I think there are going to be choices that are going to be made by different nationalities, different countries when you embark on these kind of things. But one critical element that we have to bear at the back of our mind is that what drives all these innovations is really the technical know-how, right? And the technical know-how is not a purview of a certain community or the other, and we all share this knowledge, and what differs is just the opportunity that each and every community is afforded to be ready to creatively look at the problems they have and devise solutions to address their problems. And I think for me, this is what is very critical. How do we develop our capabilities as countries, as nations? How do we look at the problems we have, and how do we make sure that the solutions we're putting in place are addressing our problems?
If I may continue on that, so we talked about technology providers from other countries, but what is Rwanda's ambition on developing your own industry, SMEs or large industry, and do you see that local industry can play some role, take some niche in this trusted connectivity sector, both inside the country, but maybe in export markets as well?
Absolutely. I mean, like any other country, we will have to develop our own small and medium enterprises. We'll have to develop our private sector, and that is common across the globe. But one thing you have to understand, we cannot do it in isolation. We have to have strategic partnerships across. And I don't think there is any country that has ever said that I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it alone. There is partnerships, there is investments that have to be made in specific areas of national interest, specific areas that drive economic development of any country. So yes, we have companies that come from other countries, they come to Rwanda and we partner with them. We have also small companies in Rwanda that are emerging. We have developed corporations that are also participating in this space. So it is, like I said again, it's not one size fits all. You're going to have different sets of solutions to different sets of issues that you have to address.
Thank you very much. So, and to the final part of the discussion, maybe let's touch this the cloud a little bit. Liam, so you already mentioned your significant contribution to Ukraine in the time of crisis, but I know there is a difference if relations with a government can be developed over a long time with all this public procurement and all that stuff. But if there is a crisis and decisions have to be made fast, and all these systems and data transfer, it's very time sensitive. So would you describe this process a little bit? So that was a crisis you helped fast. What are the lessons learned from there about maybe potential preparation for the future incidents like that?
Yeah, there's a slightly interesting article in the Canadian press to the Canadian government which said, look, Canada, the Ukrainians have developed a 70-service government infrastructure called DIA during a period of war. Why are we taking so long? And I go back to our question about speed. So Ukraine was about speed more than anything else, is we wanted to help people out. I mean, literally, I was explaining this yesterday at our all hands that literally we sat down with the Ukrainians over a lunch on the day of the invasion and said, what do we want to save? And wrote out what we needed to save, from citizen registers to the criminal records, to the anti-corruption records, to the land registry, so that you could see who owned what, those things, and that was really important to move really quickly at that point. But the lesson it gave us was really twofold. Number one, continuity of government and trust in government is right at the heart of the provision of services for government. If the citizens don't trust that you'll be secure, and you'll look after the data properly. And if your citizens don't trust that you'll be there when they need you, then that's, you're failing at the first part. So that's really important. Continuity of service and continuity of government. The next point is, yes, being in a war situation meant that certain, procurement, and the same thing is during COVID, the procurement rules were flexed, I would say, to help people move quickly. But effective and proper procurement can help you develop your services at speed if you've got it set up right. Australia, or we've talked to Brazil, we've talked to Mexico, we've talked to, and we're working with other countries around the world about bringing forward the ability to use public procurement to generate economic growth. And that's principally by using cloud as the backbone of the delivery of services, so that small businesses can grow. And you may have seen the growth of the G-Cloud, the digital marketplace in the United Kingdom, where £4 billion worth of business is done, 50% of it is done with small, medium enterprises. That's a huge boost to the local digital economy that government can provide if government starts to use modern and effective technologies. And it comes back actually to Innocent's point about human capacity and capability building. And that's one of the reasons why we've invested so much in capability and training. We've pledged to train 29 million people over the next 5 years, so that we can have a strong base of citizens who can start to use cloud services effectively for the future. Obviously, we have an interest in that, but our interest in that is mostly to help our customers and our government customers succeed by enabling them to have the people and the skills to go faster. And that's really our commitment at that point.
Thank you very much. Innocent, what do you think? Does Rwanda government has any issues in storing their data in cloud, where the data are situated somewhere in other territories, or it's not a concern for the nation?
I mean, first of all, let me touch on something that Liam just mentioned about the agility and speed to be able to deliver services quickly. And emergencies really do teach us a lot, and COVID did. During the pandemic, we're able to, really have a system where, number one, everybody could be tested and get their results, in a matter of hours. And when we started, vaccination processes, we really had to have, everybody who is vaccinated, and you'd be able to tell them when they would come for their second shot. And really, the speed at which we were able to have these services really did teach us a lot, that even in public sector, even in the government, you can have the agile approach to really developing and offering services. And I think it is really critical. And now, shifting over to the question of where to host it. Number one, I think there are laws, that govern how these things are done. For example, if there are sufficient reasons why data has to be stored outside the country, and there are proper provisions to ensure security and safety of that data, I think that is acceptable. But by and large, both the cybersecurity law and data protection and privacy law require data to be resident in the country, but it does not necessarily mean that your data cannot be stored outside. As long as you provide, security, as long as protection, and ensure, availability when it is needed, and as long as, the personal data, the owner of the data, has access, and I can be able to control what happens.
Isn't it about you having control over that data? That's what sovereignty means, is having control over the data. So it's not what the data is, it's the keys.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I would like to continue on that topic, definitely, but looking at the time, I would ask you now to take 10 seconds to think one sentence. Would you say one sentence that kind of represents your main idea that you would like to give to the audience on the topics we discussed? So I give you 10 seconds to think. And obviously Liam is ready already.
Yeah, I'd just say, don't do it all. We have a sticker in my team, which is, don't do it all yourself, you can't.
Thank you. Innocent?
I think it revolves around human beings, and if it solves a human issue, let's do it.
Thank you. Rodrigo?
Change the way we look at space. It's not anymore only about exploration. Science remains very important, but space is in our daily lives.
Thank you. Cecilia?
Be open, collaborate, and show me your friends, and I'll tell you who you are.
Excellent. And now you have the clear guidelines how to move further. So let's thank the panelists.